This webinar is part of a series of the Switch Asia program, the EU Switch Asia program, in partnership with the European Environmental Bureau. And as you come in, I will tell you a few words. First, maybe a little bit of housekeeping. Mimi, if you could go to the next slide, please. So welcome, everybody. This is an hour-and-a-half webinar. You are muted, but you are most welcome to ask questions as the webinar takes place through our chat or through the Q&A box. You can always also raise your hand to ask a question, and if time permits, we will give you the floor. And I will present now briefly the agenda. So this is me, the moderator. Our main speaker is not here yet, but fear not, we have many good things to say with our panelists, so it's okay. I will introduce briefly the webinar, and then we will have a panel and some time for some Q&A before the concluding remarks from our partner from the European Environmental Bureau. So what I'd like to say very briefly about this webinar is that if you watched previous ones, the difference with this one is that this EU policy is not adopted yet. It's a forthcoming policy, and it will be an overarching policy, which is likely to provide a revision of several European instruments to really make circular models more competitive on the international scene. It's expected to be adopted at the end of 2026, and it will probably incentivize the use of secondary materials in manufacturing to really close the loop. So you can imagine that producers now are really going to have to rethink their product designs and inform their suppliers of these new specifications they're going to have. Key sectors that are expected to be covered are packaging, electronics, chemicals, but also construction, transportation, and textile. And we can imagine that this is really an opportunity for Asian policymakers to upgrade their value chains and their production lines, to reduce waste, and to also become more competitive, as the EU is also hoping through this Circular Economy Act. So, on these words, I would like to introduce our panel. So, next slide, please. If our speaker comes a bit later, we'll introduce her afterwards. So I'm very happy to welcome today the following panelists. Ms. Eva Bill, who is Head of Circular Economy of the European Environmental Bureau, our partner for this series of webinars, and who has extensive experience in circular economy. Also, Mr. Rasmus Nordqvist, who is a member of the European Parliament, and he was previously a member of the Danish Parliament for 2 terms, and he has large experience in the fashion industry. So I think he'll have a lot to say about the textile sector. I'm also very happy to welcome Ms. Latifaida Latif, who is Assistant Director for Analysis and Monitoring on Finance and Socioeconomic Issues at the ASEAN Secretariat. And I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Zaki Zaman, who is Country Representative of UNIDO, a UN agency on industrial development in Bangladesh. So both will have the ASEAN and the Bangladesh perspective complementary to the European perspective. So to open this webinar, I would like to invite Mr. Rasmus Nordqvist to share with us how, as a member of the European Parliament who might debate and vote on this upcoming law in not too long, if you could tell us what should be the long-term vision in your view of this act, and what would be the next steps to reach this vision in your view. And also, if you could share with us a little bit, it'll be interesting to hear about your views on the trade implications of this act. I think that's particularly important for our mainly Asian audience or Asia-based audience. Yes, so the floor is yours, Rasmus.
Well, thank you very much. I hope this microphone is better. I've changed out the one that was before. Good. Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I think it's highly needed with these conversations, especially now when the public consultation on the Circular Economy Act starting from the Commission side. So it's really important that we have these dialogues on the topic. First of all, I must say I have been extremely happy when I saw the dedication from the Commission side to actually work on circular economy. I mean, circular economy for many years has a bit been a niche thing we put aside and said this is nice for environment, but what has happened now is really we are shifting and we are moving circular economy into the center at saying this is actually hardcore economic policy. This is about competitiveness. It's about creating jobs. It's about this the whole scale up of this whole economy, and I think that's really a step forward. Is really my initial remarks. What we know now is going to come from the Commission is really it's a review of a lot of the things we already have. We have a lot of legislation when it comes to waste, when it comes to all these things, and I think that's timely and needed because the steps I see which we need to is of course that we make first of all the internal market works for circular economy. This means that we don't keep on thinking in linear business model when we don't have 27 different legislation within EU, but we actually beginning to think as a circular economy market. Then of course, I mean, the whole discussion now is also part of this broader geopolitical discussion we're seeing. I mean, we have conflicts, we have trade, let's say, dispute across. And here again, I mean, for Europe, what is needed is actually we are becoming much better at reusing, recycling raw materials. And that is an important factor here as well. A very important part of this as well, this exercise is going to be the financing part of it, of course, how to finance this internally in Europe. I think that we're seeing some steps from the Commission in the talks on the Clean Industrial Deal, but we need to see how we can use these investments actually also to be linked with the private investments. And there we still have a long way to go in Europe. And I think most probably could learn quite a lot from Asia because we actually know that Asia has been in the forefront when it comes to recycling and developing of that whole industry. Perhaps the last bit I would say here initially is that, I mean, we have to be aware, of course, that we know the waste hierarchy and we know we need to use less. We need to work in that way. But with what we're seeing right now, I think it's urgently that we go into these discussions also from an industrial point of view and say, how can we actually scale up the circular part of industries, and then we can reduce other places. So we're actually using that way of making the whole reduced part of it, so we don't all of a sudden again see the circular economy actually being the loser. Then when it comes to trade, and I think that's an important point, of course, in this discussion between Bangladesh and Europe right now, I mean, we're going to have to keep more of the raw materials in Europe, secondary raw materials we have. Therefore, there will be less trade in that way. But I think actually two regions that could benefit from it, both of us, is actually the Asian European Union. That I say we need to make the internal market work on this matter doesn't mean we're closing down trade. It's just meaning that we need to build up production as well and reuse facilities within Europe. And if we make the right regulation here, I also think it can be a driver for even better development in other markets around the world. Especially I'm thinking about a question like, I mean, you're mentioning my textile background and the question on plastic and polyester, polymers. I mean, if we actually did something about this in Europe, use some of the tools we have, for example, the CBAM, enlarge the scope to also being on polymers, So we have less virgin material coming in, and we actually using the CBAM, the carbon border mechanism tool to put a price on it. I mean, that would be good for all of us, no matter where we are in the world, because if we use less plastic, it's less fossil fuels, and that would be good for so many things, and it would develop the whole recycling market and industry as well. It was a bit all over the place, but I hope I
No,
covered
it's a
most of
great introduction. I like that you're talking about the other policies that we also covered in this series, CBAM, and it's a policy that is very much discussed in Asia. Others not so much yet. So people are a little bit worried about CBAM because it's already adopted, and so that the fact that you mention it is really important, and that you say that you mentioned that the point is not to close down trade at all. It's to improve the products that we have in Europe and also in Asia for consumers. So yeah, it's very important points you make. Thank you so much, Rasmus. Well, I think we'll have time to come back and so to hear your reaction to the other panelists. And now I'd like to invite Eva also to share her thoughts as a representative of civil society. In your view, Eva, what would be the long-term vision of the Act? What should it be? And what should be the next steps to reach this vision? And maybe if you could share some thoughts on the trade implications from your point of view and the many environmental NGOs that you represent at EEB. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Elodie, for the invitation. As Elodie mentions, we are a large network of nearly 200 environmental civil society organizations and networks. And we are actively working with our members and partners across a wide variety of environmental policy, but specifically on circular economy, we are working to provide data and evidence to help shape the upcoming Circular Economy Act. And as Elodie mentioned, indeed, this initiative is planned for the fourth quarter of 2026, but there will already this summer, we are told by the Commission, be a public consultation that will be launched within the next few weeks. And this public consultation will be open for at least 13 weeks, so let's say until middle of October, as far as we are informed. And this will be a really important moment to contribute evidence and data to help shape the upcoming Circular Economy Act. And that's certainly something that we are working with our members and partners to already now help shape the upcoming Circular Economy Act. We also already in February published a position paper on it, but I think we'll continue to work together with our networks to help shape a view on this. And that's exactly the question that we were asked today, which I'm very happy about. I think from the thinking that we've heard from the Commission so far, there are some very encouraging measures to look at a better market for secondary materials, really indeed making it not easier to buy, as it is at the moment, easier to buy virgin materials, but also really enabling and facilitating a market for secondary materials. Of course, one element that we would like to see for the long-term vision of the circular economy is this overall resource governance perspective, looking not just at what can we do to improve trade flows of waste that already exists in the economy, but what can we do to reduce consumption? What can we do to reduce footprint? What can we do to reduce what goes into the economy? And that's an analogy I like to think about, is that we are really with those measures trying to mop the floor of an overflowing sink, but we need to find measures that reduce the flow of the tap or the flow of what comes out in the other end. We're never going to be able to mop it up in time. So that's why we bring in the resource governance perspective, and we would like to see, if possible, not just in the EU, but an overall resource use reduction commitment and a management of resources at a global level that takes into account the scarcity that we all know is real of all resources that we need for our survival. It's a bit of a dramatic start, but that's still a really important long-term perspective for us. And we think that the EU, specifically our material and consumption footprints, are still far beyond what is sustainable within planetary boundaries, and the progress on circular material use is very slow. Right now, there's a commitment. We are at about 12% circular material use rate in the European economy. And there's a commitment already in the previous Circular Economy Action Plan to make it to 24% by 2030. But even that is not a very high ambition. But we have not, since the previous Circular Economy Action Plan, made much progress to go beyond those 12%. So I think it will be really important to think a bigger resource governance perspective into this and to continue with the ambition towards having a higher circular materials use rate. And on the topics raised also by Mr. Nordquist now, we think there's merit in harmonization, as he mentions, and to not work as 24 separate markets in the EU. But I think the main objective should be in improvement, of course, and I'm sure that Mr. Nordquist is aligned with that as well, that it would be better to harmonize policies that are very effective than to harmonize the lowest common denominator. And one very important topic I would like to mention that is also relevant, I think, to the Asian context is the concept of extended producer responsibility, which we think is a very important concept of really assigning responsibility to the producer to pay also for the management of the goods that they put on the market. But at the moment, it is a bit fragmented, and that is one of the problems. But another problem of the extended producer responsibility schemes is the cost coverage, which right now the fees barely cover waste management. And we would like to see a much more comprehensive system that encourages reduction in resource use, but also encourages redesign, encourages a rethinking of how the products are made, and also encourages reuse and repair. And indeed, for these EPR fees, and another problem in the global context is how this mechanism can be designed to improve the higher levels of waste hierarchy where the products end up, because now at the moment we may be from Europe exporting cars that are considered roadworthy, or textiles that are considered rewearable, or electronics that are considered reusable. But are they actually used to their highest possible potential when they are sent outside of the EU? And how are they disposed of at the end of their useful life? And can extended producer responsibility, the fees that we collect from producers in Europe, can they support this effort also outside of Europe? That's a really important question that we hope that the Commission will think about as they go into the further development of the Circular Economy Act. I think there are trade implications. There are many, many important implications, because there's no denying that most of what we consume in Europe and most of what we waste has a link to many countries outside of the EU. And the value chains are undeniably intertwined in the production and trade and recycling and end of life. So we will have to the EU will have to work with the partners who design the products and the partners who enable recycling value chain in order to get to those ambitious targets of, well, hopefully beyond 24% circular materials use rate, and even beyond that, as Mr. Nordquist mentioned as well, a real reshaping of the fundamental economic principles of how the economy operates. It's not just about adding an appendage of recycling to our currently unlimited extractive economy. It is about transforming this into an economy that can be sustained within planetary boundaries. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Eva. It's quite broad. I noted not only reduction of consumption, but also better designed EPR policies, so that they can encourage reuse, repair, and also generally enabling a true real market for secondary materials. And that, I think that will resonate for many Asian policymakers, because they are also thinking of these points and how they can also roll out EPR in a significant manner in their own markets. And on this note, so also we have to keep in mind that this Circular Economy Act is upcoming. So that's also why, for those who are tuning in now, we haven't presented this act in detail, and it's also possibly why the Commission may not have joined today, the European Commission, because they cannot give details at this stage. And also, as you noted, Eva, there is an upcoming consultation on this act, and it will be really important to hear from your voices in Asia of what this could mean for global value chains. So stay tuned with the EU Commission news, and you may see the link for that consultation. And on this note, I'd like to first hear from some Asian counterparts and partners, and I'd like to invite Ms. Latifa to share with us what are currently the trends for circular economy planning and legislation in the ASEAN, because this is the region that you cover, Ms. Latifa, as the Assistant Director for Analysis and Monitoring on Finance and Socioeconomic Issues at the ASEAN Secretariat. And I'd like to know also from you how you see what are the investments that are needed today for the Asia Pacific to adapt to the requirements of such a upcoming legislation that would make the world more circular and would demand more secondary materials. What is the status now in ASEAN, and how do you think the future looks like, Latifa?
Thank you, Elodie, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm going to approach this topic from several angles, from several facets. But it's not. I'm not talking from the legislation perspective, because at the ASEAN level, what we're trying to do is looking at harmonizing what each ASEAN member states already have. And in doing so, when it comes to circular economy, it's a bit fragmented in the sense that every ASEAN member state has different levels of development or advancement with regards to circular economy. But the good news is, in 2021, we came up with a framework for circular economy for the ASEAN economic community. The main motivation behind this is, of course, addressing climate change. And also we need to be able to address the issues of our finite resources, and how do we efficiently use the resources that we have within the region. And a circular economy is actually one of the key strategies for ASEAN in our carbon neutrality strategy. And we like what Mr. Norquez mentioned, the way that we're looking at circular economy is not just another another appendix in our policy documents, but it is actually a new sources of growth for the region. An internal assessment, our own internal modeling that we did, indicate that transition towards circular economy for the region, for ASEAN, will be able to create up to $4.9 trillion value add to our GDP. And this is a huge amount by 2050. It creates jobs, and this is something that we need to aspire towards. And that in 2021, the leaders wanted to have this framework for 10 member states to be able to work or move towards the same destination, so to speak. So in 2023, we have the implementation plan that covers 3 key sectors or high impact sectors. And this is the first phase of implementation for our for our circular economy. And what we've also realized with regards to circular economy transition is that a lot of the initiatives or actions that has been taken largely are at national level. But ASEAN member states are made up of 10 economies. Some of us are big, some of us are small, and we realize that when you talk about circular economy, for it to be effective, it also requires economies of scale. And we need to start looking into governing the transboundary movements of materials, of circular products and materials. And this is where we don't have a legislation or an act, especially not at the regional level. But what ASEAN has right now is we are negotiating our trade in goods agreement. The upgraded ASEAN trade in goods agreement will actually address circular elements across the region. So what it means is that we will include circular products within our trade in goods agreement, and the first phase of that implementation will, of course, focus on a few areas that we need to identify. What are the maybe perhaps material streams or product streams that we are ready to engage when it comes to trade in relation to circular economy. And we're not just looking at recycling, for example. We're looking at remanufacturing. ASEAN is a huge hub for electronic products, and our citizens are highly sensitive to new handphone designs, and these are the things. And as we move towards digital society, this is another aspiration for ASEAN to move towards to embark on the digital transformation. We also need to be able to address all these materials and devices that's going to come aboard. And these are the things that relates to circular economy and how we are addressing it. And right now, it is being negotiated by our negotiators in the trade in goods agreement, which will conclude by the end of this year. And that's key to us, because despite, although we don't have any legislation, we now will have a legally binding agreement among 10 ASEAN member states that's committed to actually advance circular economy and enable transparent transboundary movements of circular products across our 10 member states. We're looking at the strategy on circular economy, looking into a wide spectrum of areas. Another area that we're looking at is also sustainable aviation fuel, because we do have a huge feedstock when it comes to sustainable fuel, biofuel, that requires enablement of transboundary movements for it to be processed. So this is another part that we are looking at as well, in terms of the products that we are focusing or zeroing in right now. And there are a lot of activities, and if I can segue into when you ask about what are the investment, we're not just looking into the hardware, but what we've noticed is that what's the kind of support that needs to be in place when we talk about transition is not just awareness, but also the capacity of all players, including regulators, enforcement officers, private sectors, and for this, ASEAN is actually establishing this year under Malaysia's chairmanship. ASEAN will be establishing ASEAN Center of Excellence for Green Transition that is focusing on circular economy transition. So what it does is helping the private sector with capacity building, looking into access to financing, looking into legislation, looking into standards, and really handhold them to make that transition. The focus is especially for MSMEs, because MSMEs lacks a lot of resources to be able to make that transition. So this Center of Excellence that will be launched towards the end of the year would be the one that could help move this agenda forward. And it's important to look into the skill set and talents that you have within the region as well. So when we talk about investment, we're investing in creating higher level of awareness, capacitating all players, all stakeholders that we have within the spectrum of circular economy. And these are among the things that currently we're looking at. Circular economy is a sexy topic in ASEAN, and we are blessed that we have a lot of support from our partners, and we are actively, and in order for it to work, what we've noticed and we realize is that there need to be strong support from the private sector. For ASEAN's implementation of circular economy framework, we actually have a body that looks into the implementation, which consists of 10 ASEAN member states. And within this body, We've also established independent advisory panel where private sectors would be able to provide feedback on the implementation of this framework. Is it effective? Is there a better way of doing so? What are the problems that they're actually facing? So we are creating a platform for private sectors, not just ASEAN private sectors, but whoever based in ASEAN who will be affected and impacted by the initiative that we're doing to provide a platform to voice concerns, to share ideas. And this is something that we hope will be able to facilitate and support the transition that they were aiming to have. I think I'll stop there, Elodie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Latifa. It's really interesting to hear about the efforts you're making, not only in the agreements that you're setting up in the ASEAN member states, but also the importance of skills and capacity building and of dialogue with the private sector. Thank you so much. I see that we have one of our panelists has joined us, Miss Carolina Da Cunha from DG Environment. Welcome. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Very pleased to welcome you, Carolina. I am wondering if this would be a good moment, if you're already settled, for you to present to us the Circular Economy Act as it is planned to be now. So I'm sorry, I'm hesitating a little bit to, as I say that, because we're facing some technical difficulties and I'm figuring out how to spotlight you. So I will do that and and invite you to speak if you're ready, Carolina.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So I work for the European Commission for Directorate General Environment, and my directorate is responsible for circular economy, among other files, and I deal specifically with waste. The unit is called From Waste to Resources. So we will be proposing a new law by the end of next year, and that is called the Circular Economy Act. So that's what I wanted to present briefly to you. And you're probably aware that in the EU we have a very broad spectrum of legal acts that deal with waste management. And they date back to the 70s. So a lot has been regulated, and really a huge progress has been made there to basically recover resources from waste so that we put them to a better use, and so that our economy becomes more circular in a sense that we do not waste resources, so that we close the loop from extraction through design of products, then using them for as long as possible, and then finally recycling or reusing again and putting them back into the economic loop, so that we don't have to mine and extract as much as we did. And that is all very nice in theory, obviously, but it's not so easy to implement in the complex reality that we live in. So our Circular Economy Act has been announced at the beginning of this new commission. And it is supposed to be delivered by the end of the next year, as I said. It will be an instrument to support the key pillars of the so-called Competitiveness Compass. Competitiveness Compass is also a flagship political initiative of this commission. And these three pillars are economic security, competitiveness, and decarbonization. So these are very key objectives of this commission. So on the economic security side, European businesses, we are all aware, rely very heavily on external suppliers of many materials from third countries. So that makes our businesses vulnerable to price volatility, to supply shortages. We don't really have control over these supplies often. So that could be mitigated to a big extent through more circular design and more EU recycling. Then on the competitiveness side, if you look at circular practices, we see that they help to reduce costs for manufacturing companies. Because in the EU, they typically spend twice as much on materials as they do on labor. or energy. So in that sense, we're looking into ways to encourage innovative solutions such as circular economy business models, repair, product as service, etc., to also boost competitiveness. And on the decarbonization side, we know very well that circular solutions are essential if we want to reach our climate neutrality by 2050. We estimate that around 20-25% of the greenhouse gas emission reduction that is needed to achieve this objective can be attained through circular practices. So it's really a lot, almost a quarter. So our mandate is to produce a legal act that will fit into the existing legislation, but is really supposed to look at, get the economics right. So look at the demand side, at the supply side of secondary raw materials, and create a single market for waste. Because we have some form of a single market, but it's not functioning the same way as for products. And that is a bit related to the legacy of waste. It used to be a hygiene problem. Now it's an important economic resource. So we live in a different reality these days. There's a lot of competition for waste and for resources that are in waste. Of course, it depends on the material and on the current economic situation, but generally it's a very, very valuable resource. Yeah, we have actually 3 different political cabinets leading on that. So it's not only environment, but it's also our colleagues that deal with growth, and that will also illustrate the importance of that file. Now, what do we envisage in practice? We would like to, we will need to propose a legal instrument. The exact form, it has to be decided, and the exact content, but what we want to do is to basically improve a number of legislative pieces in a very targeted manner to get this single market improved for secondary raw materials and waste. So demand and supply measures, as I said, but also very importantly, simplification and reduction of administrative burden. Now, we will soon launch stakeholder consultations. That will be an open public stakeholder consultation. So external actors and also third countries, I think, are welcome to provide their comments if they're interested. And maybe just a little bit of content on what we are already looking at and what we have identified as barriers to this free circulation of secondary raw materials in Europe. First of all, we don't have a very clear definition of what is no longer waste. We know what waste is, but we don't know what ceases to be waste. So the end of waste point is not harmonized across the EU. We have a mechanism to set end of waste criteria on the European level, but this is a slow process, so we need to really make it faster, or have a sort of a mutual recognition mechanism. So if in Italy a material is not considered waste, why should it be considered waste in Poland? So this kind of a mechanism might also be interesting. We will have to look at that, because this will really reduce administrative costs and enable economies of scale. Then we want to look into extended producer responsibility. So that's a tool that we use where producers contribute financially to waste management. So whenever they place a product on the market that is applicable to textiles, to electronics, to packaging, they have to pay a small fee. And that is used by municipalities then to sort waste, to collect it, and to manage it in the right way. Some of the money should also be invested in prevention. So, so that's an interesting mechanism, but it's also very different in different member states, and we need to look at how to harmonize this, especially that a lot of producers now fall into 3 or so extended producer responsibility schemes, because if you look at your, I don't know, T-shirt that has a lighting element, so that is textiles, that is already electronics. It can have a battery, it will be in packaging. So you have potentially 4 different payments. So, and then in 27 member states. So this really needs a lot of attention. But it's interesting because this mechanism promotes circular design. This fee that producers pay, it should be eco-modulated. So the more circular the product is, the less they pay, or they pay nothing if it's completely reusable or circular. So this is another side that we want to look at. We also want to look at public procurement, a very powerful tool. If we can have circular criteria, but very simple ones that public procurers could apply quickly and easily for a limited number of key products, that could also really boost demand for secondary raw materials. So apart from these, there will be a very big chunk of work related to e-waste, electronic equipment. So we now have an old directive that we're revising. It's the fastest growing waste stream in Europe. It grows at 2% per year, and only 40% of that is recycled. So we're losing a lot of extremely valuable materials there. So we will look into that, turn it probably into regulation, cover more electronics, more products, and so on. And finally, we will probably also have what we call flanking measures, so measures that are not related to the waste legislation that I'm responsible for, but measures such as taxation. Is a very complicated topic in Europe because it requires unanimity of all the member states to do something. We are looking specifically into scrap metals, where we see a need to improve circularity. And we will also look into specific measures to make recycling of critical raw materials within the EU more attractive than their export outside the EU, because this is also a bit of a problem. I think one more measure maybe that I should mention that we are also looking at is again related to the demand side. How can we absorb more of these secondary raw materials in products? And this is recycled content targets. You have probably come across this concept. We've introduced recycled content in packaging, and we're also looking at it in vehicles, in cars, for plastics, and potentially for aluminum and metal and steel, but perhaps some other materials, maybe in construction. So yes, this is another area where we see that maybe a percentage of recycled content that is mandatory would then really boost that recycling sector, and also ensure the quality of the recyclate, because then of course there will be industry specifications for this material to be incorporated into products. So in a nutshell, that's what we are looking at. I cannot tell you much more because it's really work in progress. We have launched studies. We're going now through this process of impact assessment and the public stakeholder consultation. So yes, you will surely hear more about that when it's more mature and the time is short. So thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, looking forward to also your input.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for this presentation. And after the first interventions that we had, it really puts things in context to see all the different markets you're going to be looking at, the different products and the complexity of it all together. If I may ask a follow-up question, maybe before introducing our next speaker, in your view, what are the trade implications of this act?
Yes, I think the most trade-related measures would be, for instance, this recycled content target. So we are looking at how to craft it in a way that guarantees equal treatment of all economic players, because everyone who introduces recycled content then of course should be allowed to market products on the European market. So So that is something that manufacturers will have to comply with. It's a little bit like, you know, other requirements that we have, safety or environmental requirements for products that are placed on the EU market, but then there would be this recycled content. Also, the big question is, how do we check compliance of products? That is especially valid now, you know, with the online trade. Where often products are placed on the market directly from the producer outside the EU to the consumer through online platforms. So, but that of course is a question not only for recycled content but also other products. So I think that would probably be the most important measure that has potentially trade implications. On the public procurement side, yes, there I think it's maybe a little bit more local, and then yes, I would not see that maybe as so much related. Maybe end of waste criteria. So, you know, if third country recycler would like to put waste derived material on the European market, then this material would need to comply with the end of waste criteria as well. So yeah, that would also require, but that's already in place. So that would require some familiarity with those criteria, those rules. Now, if we have mutual recognition of end of waste criteria, then we would probably have to reflect a little bit further on trade implications, because that would be a new mechanism. So it's not like there's one European piece of law that says, okay, these are the end of waste criteria. If your scrap or plastic or paper meets those criteria, then this is considered a product in the EU. But then what if we have mutual recognition? So then we have different types of end of waste in different member states. But what about third countries? So these are precisely the things that we need to look at now in the context also of this impact assessment.
Yes, thank you so much, Carolina. There will be a lot of complexity depending on the sector and the products looked at and their implications for consumers, I imagine. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite Dr. Zaki Zaman to answer a few questions as well in his perspective from Bangladesh as the country director of the UN Industrial Development Organization in Bangladesh. Welcome, Zaki. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Can you speak again? Yes, I can hear you now. I didn't hear you first. Thank you. Welcome. I'd like to know from your perspective, how are companies already adopting circular practices in Bangladesh and maybe beyond the South Asian region, and how will that help them fit into global value chains that are changing with these requirements, such as the ones described by Carolina? And maybe if you could tell us a little bit about the investments that are needed today to adapt to these requirements. And if you had the time to look at some of the questions that are coming in through our Q&A, also if you, in relation to this, if you have ideas of financing mechanisms or blended finance models that have enabled circular business models to scale up in Bangladesh, for instance. And maybe some of the most critical, this is new, so this wasn't in our prepared questions. It's one from Mr. Emil Yusupov. What are the critical enablers for transitioning from pilot initiatives to more systemic national circular economy strategies that maybe you have seen in Bangladesh?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Elodie and Switch Asia as well. While answering your question, I will answer from two angles. One from what is happening from the government part, and also what is happening at the micro level, that is the enterprise level. In the government, if we see the government policy and planning papers. The 8th five-year plan already adopted that circular economy, and from the circular economy principal point of view. And the current present government, it was 8th five-year plan was adopted during the last government. The current interim government, they have finalized the smooth transition strategy for Bangladesh for graduation from LDC to a developing countries. So that strategy pretty much aligned with what is coming from its trading partners. They are emphasizing on the resource efficiency and waste reduction through circular economic practices, and also emphasizing on undertaking research to explore areas of improvement of current production practices to implement that model. Besides, under the, as you might know, you mentioned that UNIDO is implementing one global project in Bangladesh, Morocco, and Egypt. The three countries focuses on three different products. Bangladesh focusing on textiles and garments, while Egypt is focusing on electronics, and Morocco is focusing on plastic materials. Bangladesh, the current switch to circular economy value chain project, advocating with Ministry of Commerce responsible for exports of Bangladesh products. They already included circular economy policy in circular economy 1 in their 2024-27 export policy. Also, UNIDO is apart from that, UNIDO is also implementing one plastic project that is also emphasizing on extended producer responsibility. That is the draft guideline already submitted to Ministry of Environment. It is now with them to press to Law Ministry for vetting. We hope sometimes in this year it will be come as an effective one. The switch to circular economy value chain also with the government emphasizing for capacity building of the industries as well as academic institutes. So they already introduced one competency standard training program for the industries and also for the academic institutes. The government agency called National Skills Development Authority, they are under the chief advisor premises. That is the macro part. And in micro part, what UNIDO is working with government on on developing a roadmap, and working with the partners are Chatham House, Circle Economy from Netherlands, and European Investment Bank for investment. As you asked for the investment one, for blended financing one, the European Union already assessed Bangladesh condition. They introduced a training program for the financial institutions for their capacity building. That is at this stage, they haven't invested, but they are in the process of developing the guideline for working in Bangladesh. And also we are working two interesting pilots with two brands, one with H&M and the other one is with Bestseller. With H&M, they are H&M working with their suppliers or integrated sorting and recycling system for blended textile waste, and also develop a traceable PET bottle waste collection for and also to trace the recycling supply chain. Interestingly, as of now, the results are there are some. They are already tested, and the textile waste testing for chemical recycling giving a better result. Now it is in the final shape for giving go ahead to H&M for going for commercial production purposes. And testing of waste and recycled fiber is also going on. And the sample is okayed by H&M. They are also they will also go for commercial production, although the supply will not be as much as their requirement, but they already started that process. There is a QR-based traceable system already established by a local young group called Garbage Man. They already introduced that with their suppliers. Around 57 scrap dealers were trained on safe and formalized practices and also avoiding child labor. And they also introduced environmental and social management system audit with their supply. With the bestseller is piloting with their 17 suppliers on the digital platform for tracking waste, training for improved waste segregation by color, type, and composition. They already introduced, and it is on pilot basis. Through this process, a bestseller already manufactured 75,000 pieces of clothes made out of recycled materials from their suppliers. For the capacity building, their circle economy is working with the meso level and micro level with the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturer Exporters Associations, as I mentioned earlier, with also government institution, a National Skills Development Authority, and two government educational institutes and one private education institute for capacity building of trainers. Already 100 participants participated and they are trained. Collaboration, and to let you know, even the project started, before the project started, the waste of textile waste and garment waste were informally is recycled in Bangladesh for last many years. The textile industries generates about more than half a million tons of textile waste, which are basically 5 to 7% of those are recycled, and exports recycled in very informal way. And there are very micro, I would say, even cottage industries, they are manufacturing low value product like cushions, carpets, and baby clothes. And some of those clothes are also exported to neighboring countries through cross-border process. So there are some initiative in Bangladesh already taken before, and this project, European Union funded project, is also expediting the project process, and there is a mass awareness among the government institution that there is a regulation coming, act is coming from European Union, as they are the largest exporters importers from Bangladesh, bigger market. So Bangladesh is trying to align with that process, and UNIDO is also working with government and private sector through donor funding and other partners facilitating the process. In terms of investment, there is no exact accurate data on the assessment on circular investment required for the circular economy. Nevertheless, there is, Bangladesh has a target for 40% coverage of renewable energy. There is an assessment more than around $37 billion of investment will be required for the infrastructure part. And the waste generated from textile, it has been estimated there is a market opportunity for $5 billion for recycling products within the country and export market for Bangladesh. Besides that, the government of Bangladesh, the central bank, introduced several refinancing scheme for green products. They have currently around $47 million is revolving fund for green products. They also have one financial product called Green Transforming Fund. This fund allows export-oriented industries to import machineries related to resources efficiency and recycling, among other areas, including textiles. I would stop here. I can answer further question if need be because of the time constraint. Elodie, is that okay?
Yes, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Zaki, for this presentation about all that is happening in Bangladesh, partly thanks to this EU-funded project, Switch to Circular Economy, that UNIDO is implementing with EIB and Chatham House. And it's great to see the positive results and also to hear about the human dimension and the important for skills development that Latifa was also mentioning, and that it's about materials, of course, but also about the people who use and market these materials. And yeah, so it's very interesting to hear these insights. Thank you. And as I invite the participants to ask questions in the Q&A. If you have any questions, we'll be very happy to pick them up. But as we have a little bit of time, this is a great opportunity to pass the floor back to our speakers, in particular to Mr. Nordqvist, who introduced briefly the act at the beginning of this webinar. Mr. Nordqvist, Rasmus, would you like to take the floor again and perhaps react to the interventions of our speakers, maybe in particular to those sharing views from Asia?
Yes, I would indeed, and thank you very much. It's been very interesting to be part of this and get the reflections and knowledge from the speakers. Where to begin? Yes, first of all, I think when Carolina explained as well what they're doing in the commission, I mean, what is so important is to build the market. And that's a problem we have today when we look at how we build market through subsidies, through what we support when it comes to public procurement, everything. We have been thinking linear, and it's that big change that needs to happen, that building of a new market, a new reality. And I just want to say, because also, I mean, this is also about trade, that I think this will be good for all regions of the world if Europe actually develop our economy into a market of circularity, because that also means all of a sudden that it would push other economies to do the same. So just in that sense, really, and it's very interesting when I've been around talking to some of the businesses who today are really SMEs in for example, textile recyclers and stuff like that, what they're screaming for, because they have the technologies, they have the know-how, they have all these things, but they don't have a market so they can scale up their production and there, I mean, really public procurement as a big muscle is key here. And yeah, so I want to say that. Then I think what I thought was really interesting from both Latifa and Saman, it was the talk about the skills, because I think indeed we have things to do here. Before I came into politics, as you said, I have a background from fashion and textiles. And I've also been teaching quite a lot in various textile colleges around Europe. And again, the thinking there when we were teaching, when we were working with students, was a linear thinking. So the whole shift has to come as well in all the different positions we see when we see a product. I mean, of course, it's production facilities, it's the know-how, it's development of new techniques, but it's also from the creative side when things are being created. There also needs to be a change in mindset and a change in the approach. And there, I think also there could be some very interesting collaboration between various regions of the world, actually, to see how to develop these new skills, how to develop this new way of thinking when we are moving into the circular economy. Because I can tell you, my ambitions is not just, let me say, a bit more circular or let's go to 24% or 30%. I mean, I want a shift in the economy. I want a shift in our way of thinking markets. and I know it's going to take a lot of steps, and some of them will be small, and we will be impatient. But that should be the approach we have. Is that this is a true shift in mindset, a true shift in market perceptions.
Thank you, Rasmus. I hear you when you say this is not only about Europe. This has to be a global shift, and I think this is very much the point of our webinars. It's to hear these different views, and not only to listen to Europe, but also to really hear from Asia how this is going to look like if it's supposed to become global. So yes, completely agree, and it's very interesting to hear your views as well from the innovators in Europe who are struggling as well to get market access, which is something we hear also in Asia. And I'd like to invite Latifa perhaps to react on these interventions and to share a bit how the ASEAN maybe envisaging this shift to a circular world, how hearing from the other speakers, Latifa, if you have some thoughts to share.
Thank you, Elodie. I think for ASEAN, the shift, we have no other options. We need to shift into circular economy, but the matter is how long does it take us to do that? And I think the way we're approaching the transition to a circular economy is in a more pragmatic way. And I think it's important for us, like what Mr. Norkis mentioned, that paradigm shift. We need to have that paradigm shift, but also be pragmatic about it, because we will be making mistakes, and we need to be able to recalibrate if we make mistakes. This is important because, for example, when we wanted to integrate circular elements in our trade in goods agreement, we've consulted experts from all corners of the world. We consulted from EU, from South America, Africa, within our region ourselves, to appreciate the complexity of implementing and operationalizing the clause or the commitments that we're going to make. And we also realized that it has to be a systemic change. It's not like one part, and then we're talking about transparency and all that, but there's also, once you have all these regulations, we will know from past experiences that it's going to be this another side of the gray economy where there's going to be illegal trafficking and all that. So that needs to be think about as well. How do we address that? And not only that, when I say pragmatic, when we talk about like our trade in goods agreement, we know we must be able to identify, are we talking about products or material streams? How are we going to operationalize this? How are we going to make this happen? Because even ISO is looking at waste as resources now. The way that they frame it, no longer waste, but it's resources. The way that we're looking at things has now shifted and changed. And how do you, unlike HS code, for example, you'll be able to explain the physical characteristic of that product, but how do you explain a life cycle of that product? And it's going to be different perspective from every country. So this is where implementation is going to be a challenge. It's not going to be smooth sailing, but what's important is that for us to be able to take it back in our stride and say, okay, this is not working, and this is how we're going to recalibrate and reshift. And that's why when we talk about a whole systemic change, what's important is that to be able to have support or inputs from all stakeholders, and this is where we think it is absolutely important to have, for example, from the academy side, in terms of giving the intellectual direction, from the private sector side, who will be the one implementing this primarily, and also from all the other stakeholders. So I think in order for us to be able to make that shift, it's taking that small steps is important, and try to look at whether we need to recalibrate the steps that we have taken. And it's I also want to address the part on financing, because this is actually a very tricky situation. I'm pleased to hear from Dr. Zaki that you seem to have quite good experiences in access to financing when it comes to circular economy, because from our experience in ASEAN, it has been very tricky. Tricky in the sense that we are able to get we have a lot of successful pilot projects when it comes to circular economy projects. For example, in Thailand, there's a lot of there's a cooperative farmers who are able to transform rice husks into biofertilizers, packaging products. So there's new technology that they introduce, but we are not able to go beyond pilot projects. We cannot scale it up, and the only interested party are impact investors, family offices. It's very difficult to actually mobilize financing for this. Again, this requires all sectoral all spots from all sectors, finance sector, even the insurance industries, for example, to step in and look at how this can be supported. So, like I said, what's in our experience dealing with 10 different member states that has different stakeholders that for each member states, for each of the member states, what's important is having that platform to be able to communicate and to be able to understand and appreciate perhaps the challenges in other parts who that we may not understand, like customs. How do they enforce this, for example? So these are the things that I think is important for us to have the conversation open and continue having discussions and to bring this this agenda forward. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Latifa. And I think in the question of diversity of contexts in ASEAN countries, you may have some elements to share with Carolina and the situation in Europe, where it's very diverse as well. And I imagine both have context to share. I also wanted to invite Dr. Zaki to share more views on his reaction to other participants' inputs. And also there's a question about the Bangladesh context that you may be able to answer, Dr. Zaki. It's about consumer awareness and behavior in the transition to a circular economy in Bangladesh, and what strategies are being implemented to foster a more circular consumer culture. So in your view, how is that happening in Bangladesh at the moment, or what are the steps needed to make it stronger?
Thank you very much for this question to the who asked these questions. See, circular economy is not a old concept in Bangladesh. I think it's same in other part of Asia, at least in Asian countries, and also in European countries as well, other parts of the globe. In terms of consumer awareness, see, currently emphasis is given on the textile and garment industry because it's the largest export earning sector for Bangladesh, and also as European Union is a major buyer. So Bangladesh is trying to abide by the rules of European Union, and that will also facilitate entering in other exporting countries as well, once you can cope up with the regulations of one of your important exporting nations. In terms of consumer awareness, let me start with, I was talking about the plastic project that UNIDO is implementing in Bangladesh with the fund of Norwegian government. That in that project, we have 4 components. One is on the EPR strategy development that, as I already submitted, and it is very much aware among the government community that plastic waste is one of the major constraints in Bangladesh for environmental threat, particularly for flood and other diseases. So government has taken the initiative and on this thing, and we thought that we are the older generations, so motivating us is more quite difficult. It is better to start with the students, and we started in a coastal belt in a place called Cox's Bazar is one of the what I would say a tourist spot with schools developing ecotourism club, and we saw the enthusiasm of the students, and the teachers are helping that on that part. Besides that, we are also working with the manufacturers on resource efficiency and cleaner production for reduction of energy uses, water uses, and also raw material uses during the manufacturing process. And supporting working with recycler industry, we just started. And we have one interesting part of this thing, that innovation challenge fund that I was talking about. SME Foundation is a government institution. Yesterday, we just initiated that program. They will implement on UNIDO's behalf of this project. Hopefully in 6 months' time, we'll see some kind of good activities from their part. The garments owners and textile owners are very much aware of what is coming from European Union. So they already welcome this project, and Commerce Ministry, major ministry for export involvement on the export part, they are also currently on board. But as you know, it always takes time to motivate your counterpart. And also there are for garments industry, there are a group of small industries and large industries. Large industries are very much capable, but challenge with the SMEs, with those who are connected with the global value chain. And to complement one of comments of Latifa's, or what she was talking, yes, financial part is working well for the large industries, but for the SMEs, it is still a challenge. Our donor, European Union, they have a separate fund. Even they have a challenge of getting access to small and particularly small enterprises. Large enterprises are getting access to that. So financing is working very well for the large industries, but still challenge for the SMEs, because there are a lot of regulations and paperwork that SMEs wants to avoid. So working with them is a challenge, and it's a challenge, and it will be a challenge, but we have to work with them. If we leave out them, then they will be out of the global value chain. And the opportunity, what they are, Eva was talking about, the opportunity of employment market and green jobs will be difficult to achieve through if SMEs cannot be brought in the main stream. That will remain challenge. What Carolina was mentioning about the acts are coming. So it's good that this webinar, at least if there are some Bangladeshis participating, they will come to know what is coming. And also through European Union is also talking about circular economy in Bangladesh. That is also one of their major focus areas. They are talking to government agencies on these things. It will create awareness, but it will take time. It will take time. Bangladesh might need some time, but in order to continue business in the international market with global value chain, it will be, and there is no way other than accepting on that platform. I would stop here.
Thank you so much, Zaki. Yes, it will take time, but I see a lot of enthusiasm and interest from your regions yourself, Zaki, and Miss Latifa, and some common questions that you're dealing with, which is interesting to note. We're reaching almost the end of our webinar, so I'd like to invite Miss Carolina, who to also give some remarks and a reaction on the interventions of our other speakers and some thoughts maybe on what you've heard from our speakers from Asia, Miss Latifa and Dr. Zaki, and maybe
Yes.
also our speakers from Europe, but you know them better and more, so it's maybe less new to you, and you exchange already together. So yes.
Yes, thank you. No, I always think that, you know, achieving circularity in Europe is not really possible if we don't achieve circularity globally, because we are all connected. So it's extremely important that all these initiatives are happening, and they all go in the same direction. We all kind of speak the same language in a sense of what we are trying to achieve. And I can also see that it's really happening very, very fast everywhere, because we have all realized, you know, that we are short of resources and want to change things and improve things. So yeah, in the ideal world, we would become globally circular, but obviously for now we have to do it in different regions, but in cooperation with each other. And I think for that, it's very important that we exchange on a regular basis, because we can then learn from each other. And since the trade is so intense and we depend so much on resources from third countries, yeah, if we don't work very closely together, I don't think that it will really be possible to achieve what we want to achieve. And yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing. Very, very inspiring what is happening there.
Thank you so much, Carolina. Yes, so partnerships and sharing is very important, and we really invite the participants of this webinar today to contribute to the consultation that will open soon on this upcoming Circular Economy Act, so you can share your thoughts and from your perspective. And I'd like to invite Eva, who hasn't had the chance to speak again yet, to share her thoughts about this discussion and also some closing remarks.
Thank you, Elodie, and thank you to everyone. I thought that final quote from Mr. Cunha was very powerful, that achieving circularity in Europe is not possible if we don't achieve circularity globally. So indeed, some very valuable contributions in this discussion. I think it's a really important moment for the circular economy at the global level. The public consultation, we will certainly be responding and coordinating input with all our members, but we also hope that many stakeholders from outside of the EU will contribute. I think one thing that stood out to me in the discussion today was the point on collaboration. I really enjoyed the Ms. Latif's many initiatives on the platform to voice concerns and share ideas for the private sector, and consulting with stakeholders around the world and appreciating the complexity, and also realizing, I thought that was very powerful, realizing that mistakes will be made, but committing to recalibration from the onset. I think this is really, it's going to be really important, and it was very inspiring to hear about the collaboration that's already happening and the collaboration that we hope will continue to happen to make sure as many perspectives and angles are taken into account as possible for this progress towards a truly circular economy. Another really important point that stood out to me was the human dimension and the talking about skills development, because ultimately for all of us, the objective is well-being of people and planet around the world, and there's many elements to that, from the skills and the capacity to deliver on the circular economy, but also simply the progress towards a healthy planet where we can all thrive and live well together. So I think these points on education, to think in a not linear way, and what Asmus mentions on the creative education and really bringing stakeholders along from the very beginning, I thought this was a very inspiring point of view. And with that, I mean, access to the young generation, but also the point from Zaki earlier on access to small enterprises as a challenge, but they are part of the value chain and we want them to continue to be part of the value chain. So this is really, it's going to be a challenge, but going to be a very important part of this human dimension of bringing everyone along into a systemic shift towards a circular economy. Another point I think that we think is very important and that was discussed extensively is the point on enforcement and implementation. And as was also mentioned, I think the online sales issue, the low quality products flooding the market is a global problem, and it's continuing to make linear products, and not just any linear products, but very short-term linear products, single-use products, the easy choice. So this is really something that is fueling the consumption crisis, but also some even more, I wouldn't say even more, but some very serious enforcement issues like illegal trafficking were mentioned as part of this discussion as well. So enforcement and implementation will be incredibly important to make the circular, but also the human choice, the easy choice, and within all of that, providing also access to finance to be able to implement the legislations. And one thing that wasn't part of this webinar per se, because we're looking into the future, into the Circular Economy Act, is of course the implementation of the circular economy files that are already on the table. And I think there are many good outcomes of the Green Deal. Some of the questions in the chat also asked about green claims and about existing policies. We're thinking also of the eco-design for sustainable products regulation, which will make sustainable products the norm. And as part of that, also part of the discussion, the digital product passport, so that we have the information in the value chain. This was also a really interesting discussion, I think, on the traceability, tracing waste, making sure that we know what is in the product, what is it composed of, and how do we dispose of it. I think there are some interesting elements also in the waste shipment regulation on the digital tracking of waste. So there are many other pieces of legislation that have not been implemented yet. And I think the enforcement and implementation of these legislations will really help with the long-term perspective of traceability and sustainable by design. One thing we did not touch on, but relates to the human safety element, is also, of course, the point on harmful chemicals in products, to make sure that it is part of the traceability and that we don't relax safety rules, but that we think the avoidance of harmful chemicals into the product design, and therefore that it becomes part of a clean circular loop. As final remark, I think I was very positive about the many mentions of systemic change, and really the framework for managing resources remains important, because as we know, I mean, this is everywhere these days, and we're feeling the climate change very acutely, and we know that 6 out of 9 of the planetary boundaries have already been crossed. So we are living outside of our allocated resource budgets. So we need to think about whether products are needed. We need to redesign products to extend their useful life. We need to improve access to and affordability of repair, and improve industrial symbiosis, which was also mentioned by some of the participants, the production processes, and making the most out of the precious resources that we all depend on. So with that, I'm happy to close the webinar, and I really look forward to continuing the conversation with all stakeholders in the EU and outside the EU to solve this global issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all speakers and participants.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.